People who earn their living in a modern heavy industry seldom engage in the kind of back-breaking toil that was the everyday lot of most workers a century ago. And yet, they earn far more. What has produced these improvements? The offhand reaction of most people is likely to be that labor unions are largely responsible for the enormous progress that workers have made in the past 2 centuries. But clearly, at least for the United States, that cannot be true. After all, in the 19th century, when workers did very well, there were hardly any labor unions at all. And even today, no more than 1 out of 4 or 5 workers is a member of a trade union. And the remainder do very well indeed, achieving the highest level of living in the world. Labor unions do, of course, benefit their members, but far from being a key to the development of the modern society, they are a throwback to an earlier pre-industrial era. These workers are on the other side of the union fence. They're building 2 Social Security offices in Baltimore. On this government project, everyone's a union worker. They rely on their union to protect them against competition from non-union labor. But some local contractors see a very different side to a closed shop.
We don't feel that anybody should be denied a choice, and we feel every man should have the choice if he wants to be unionized or not. Not legislative, not saying he must belong to a union. We feel when you tell a man he must belong to a union or he must do this or that, you're taking freedoms away from this man, the freedom of choice of this businessman here to choose me, to do business with me. All business needs this right to choose to do business with each other. And by the same token, our employees have the right to choose whether they want unionization or not.
On this government site, authorized personnel only really means unionized personnel only. Unions have long recognized that the surest and most effective way for them to get power without violence is to have the federal government on their side. That's why so many strong unions have made it a point to locate their headquarters close to the source of power.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. 205 back.
The more they get paid, the better people can live, whether they're paid in cash or in kind. The Staff Restaurant in the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. These people are eating subsidized food. Like all civil servants, federal workers get extremely generous fringe benefits. They have also had an incredible degree of security. It's been almost impossible to fire a civil servant. In January 1975, a typist in the Environmental Protection Agency was so consistently late for work that her supervisors demanded she be fired. It took 19 months to do it, and this incredible 21-foot-long chart lists the steps that had to be gone through to satisfy all the rules and all the management and union agreements.
This is really a typical horror story is what it amounts to. And it shows the number of steps you got to go through.
The process involved the girl supervisor, his deputy director, his director of personnel operations, the agency's branch chief, an employee relations specialist, a second employee relations specialist, a special office of investigations, and the director of the Office of Investigations. This veritable telephone directory, need I add, was paid with taxpayers' money.
Instead of having a system where the employee...
Who could invent a better protected job than this one before it came to its end?
We now have a time certain at which the decision has to be made within the agency.
Half an hour's drive out of Washington, you come to Montgomery County, where many very senior civil servants live. It has the highest average family income of any county in the United States. Of the people who live here who are employed, 1 out of every 4 works for the federal government. Like all civil servants, they have job security, salaries linked to the cost of living, a fine retirement plan, also linked to the cost of living, and many manage to qualify for Social Security as well, becoming double dippers. Many of their neighbors are also here because of the federal government. congressmen, lobbyists, top executives of corporations with government contracts. As government expands, so does this neighborhood. Government protects its workers just as trade unions protect their members, but both do it at someone else's expense. When unions get higher wages for their members by restricting entry into an occupation, those higher wages are at the expense of other workers who find their opportunities reduced. When government pays its employees higher wages, those higher wages are at the expense of the taxpayer. But when workers get higher wages and more civilized working conditions through the free market, when they get them by firms competing with one another for the best workers, by workers competing with one another for the best jobs, those higher wages are at nobody's expense. They can only come from higher productivity, greater capital investment, more widely diffused skills. The whole pie is bigger. There's more for the worker, but there's also more for the employer, the investor, the consumer, and even the taxpayer. That's the way a free market system distributes the fruits of economic progress among all the people. That's the essence of the age of the worker.